The dense forest was alive with the whispers of the wild. Towering trees, their bark gnarled and ancient, stretched toward the heavens, their canopies filtering the sunlight into a mosaic of gold and green. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the occasional rustle of underbrush hinted at unseen creatures moving in the shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a bird let out a sharp, piercing call, a sound that seemed to hang in the air like a warning. Deep within this untamed realm, a lone tiger prowled. His once majestic coat, a tapestry of orange and black, now bore the scars of countless battles. His left ear was torn, and a deep gash ran along his flank, a testament to his fall from grace. He was no longer the undisputed king of this territory. Exiled by a younger, stronger rival, he now wandered the fringes of the forest, a shadow of his former self. The tiger moved with a deliberate grace, his massive paws sinking silently into the soft earth. His amber eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the surroundings for any sign of danger or opportunity. Hunger gnawed at his belly, a constant reminder of his precarious existence. He had not eaten in days, and the forest, though teeming with life, offered no easy prey. The deer were wary, the boars aggressive, and the smaller creatures too swift to catch. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air almost oppressive. The usual symphony of chirps and rustles seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie silence. The tiger's instincts prickled. He paused, his ears twitching as he strained to catch the faintest sound. Something was wrong. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he caught a whiff of a familiar scent, one that stirred both anger and fear. His rival. The younger tiger had marked this territory recently, his scent fresh and potent, the exiled king's muscles tensed, his claws digging into the earth. He had no desire for another confrontation, but the forest was vast and its resources finite. Survival demanded courage, even in the face of certain defeat. The tension in the air was palpable. The tiger's heart pounded as he crept forward, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to shift, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. The forest, once a place of refuge, now felt like a labyrinth of danger. His breath came in shallow bursts, his body coiled like a spring, ready to react at a moment's notice. Then he saw it. A clearing ahead, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. In the center lay the carcass of a young deer, its lifeless eyes staring blankly at the sky. The scent of blood was intoxicating, but the tiger hesitated. This was too easy. Prey did not simply drop dead in the middle of a clearing. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but the gnawing hunger in his belly overruled caution. He stepped into the clearing, his movements slow and deliberate. The silence was deafening, the absence of sound more unnerving than any noise. As he approached the carcass, his eyes darted around, searching for any sign of a trap. But there was nothing. No movement, no sound, no scent of another predator. Just as he lowered his head to feed, a deafening roar shattered the silence. The exiled king spun around, his hackles raised, to face his rival. The younger tiger emerged from the shadows, his coat gleaming in the fading light. He was larger, stronger, and brimming with confidence. His eyes locked onto the exiled king, and there was no mistaking the challenge in his gaze. The exiled king's heart raced, a mixture of fear and defiance surging through him. He knew he was outmatched, but pride and desperation fueled his resolve. He bared his teeth, a low growl escaping his throat as he prepared to defend himself. The two tigers circled each other, their movements mirror images of power and grace. The tension was electric, the air thick with the promise of violence. The younger tiger lunged first, his massive paws swiping through the air with terrifying speed. The exiled king dodged, his movements fluid but strained. He retaliated with a swipe of his own, his claws grazing his rival's shoulder. The battle was fierce and brutal, a clash of titans that shook the very ground beneath them. The exiled king fought with the desperation of a creature who had nothing left to lose. But his strength was waning. Each blow he landed seemed to have little effect, while his rival's attacks grew more relentless. Just as it seemed the exiled king's fate was sealed, a new sound pierced the air. A sharp, human whistle, followed by the crack of a rifle. The younger tiger froze, his ears twitching as he turned toward the source of the noise. The exiled king seized the opportunity, retreating into the shadows as his rival bounded away, disappearing into the forest. The exiled king crouched low, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. His body ached, his wounds fresh and bleeding, but he was alive. The sound of the exiled king. The exiled king moved deeper into the forest, his body a symphony of pain and exhaustion. Each step was a struggle, his muscles trembling under the weight of his injuries. The gash along his flank burned with every movement, and his torn ear throbbed dully. Yet he pressed on, driven by an instinct as old as the forest itself. The will to survive. The forest around him changed as he ventured further from the clearing. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining to form a canopy so thick that even the twilight struggled to penetrate. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of moss and running water. The ground beneath his paws was softer, cushioned by layers of fallen leaves and damp earth. It was a place of solitude, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The tiger paused by a small stream, its waters clear and inviting. He lowered his head, lapping at the cool liquid, feeling it soothe his parched throat. For a moment, he allowed himself to rest, his amber eyes scanning the surroundings with a wary gaze. The forest was quiet here, the usual sounds of life muted by the dense foliage. It was a place of refuge, but also of mystery. As he drank, a faint rustling sound reached his ears. His head snapped up, his body tensing as he searched for the source of the noise. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. The tiger's heart raced, his instincts screaming at him to flee, but he remained still, his eyes locked on the shadows ahead. A figure emerged from the underbrush, moving with a grace that rivaled his own. It was a tigress, her coat a vibrant tapestry of orange and black, unmarred by the scars of battle. Her eyes, a deep, piercing green, met his with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She was smaller than him, but her presence was commanding, a queen in her own right. The exiled king's breath caught in his throat. He had not seen another of his kind since his exile, and the sight of her stirred something deep within him. A longing for companionship, for the connection he had lost. But he knew better than to approach her recklessly. Tigers were solitary creatures, and their encounters were often fraught with tension. The tigress tilted her head, studying him with a keen intelligence. She took a step closer, her movement slow and deliberate, as if testing his reaction. The exiled king remained still, his body coiled like a spring, ready to react at a moment's notice. But there was no aggression in her gaze, only a quiet understanding. For a moment they stood like that, two apex predators locked in a silent exchange. Then the tigress turned and disappeared into the shadows, her movements as fluid as the stream beside them. The exiled king watched her go, a mixture of relief and regret washing over him. He knew better than to follow her, but the encounter left him with a sense of hope, a reminder that he was not entirely alone in this vast, untamed world. As the night deepened, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves as small animals scurried through the underbrush, the occasional cry of a night bird. All of it created a symphony that was both haunting and beautiful. The exiled king found a secluded spot beneath a large tree, its roots forming a natural shelter. He curled up, his body aching with exhaustion, and allowed himself to rest. But sleep did not come easily. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, the events of the day replaying in his mind like a relentless storm. The battle with his rival, the encounter with the poachers, the mysterious tigress, all of it weighed heavily on him. He was a creature of instinct, but even he could not ignore the deeper currents that stirred within him. As he lay there, a new sound reached his ears, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder with each passing moment. The exiled king's ears twitched, his body tensing as he tried to identify the source of the noise. It was unlike anything he had ever heard, a sound that was both alien and unsettling. The thrumming grew louder, accompanied by a faint glow that seeped through the trees. The exiled king rose to his feet, his senses on high alert. He moved toward the source of the light, his movements slow and deliberate. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of life fading into an eerie silence. As he approached, the glow grew brighter, casting strange shadows on the trees. The thrumming was almost deafening now, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to echo in his very bones. The exiled king's heart pounded as he stepped into a small clearing, his eyes widening at the sight before him. In the center of the clearing stood a strange metallic structure, its surface gleaming in the moonlight. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a creation of man that seemed out of place in this wild, untamed world. The thrumming emanated from within the structure, a low, steady pulse that seemed to vibrate through the air. The exiled king's instincts screamed at him to flee, but curiosity held him in place. He circled the structure, his eyes scanning it for any sign of danger. There were no humans in sight, no signs of life at all. The structure seemed abandoned, a relic of a world that had no place in the forest. As he approached, a sudden movement caught his eye. A small panel on the side of the structure slid open, revealing a dark, gaping hole. The exiled king froze, his body tensing as he prepared to react. But nothing emerged from the hole. No humans, no animals, no threat. Instead, a faint mechanical whirring sound filled the air, and a small object was ejected from the structure, landing softly on the ground. The exiled king approached cautiously, his eyes locked on the object. It was a small metallic device, its surface covered in strange symbols and blinking lights. He sniffed at it, his nose wrinkling at the unfamiliar scent. The device emitted a faint, high-pitched beep, and a small screen on its surface lit up, displaying a series of images. The images were strange and incomprehensible, a jumble of shapes and colors that meant nothing to the tiger. But as he watched, the images began to change, forming a pattern that seemed almost familiar. It was a map, a representation of the forest and its surroundings. The exiled king's eyes narrowed as he studied the map, his instincts telling him that it was important. But before he could make sense of it, the device emitted a final, loud beep and fell silent. The screen went dark, and the device lay still on the ground. The exiled king stared at it for a moment, a mixture of confusion and frustration swirling within him. He had no way of understanding the device, no way of knowing what it meant. With a low growl, he turned away from the structure and the device, his mind racing. The encounter had left him with more questions than answers, a sense of unease that he could not shake. The forest, once a place of refuge, now seemed filled with mysteries and dangers that he could not comprehend. As he disappeared into the shadows, the structure remained in the clearing, its thrumming growing fainter with each passing moment. The exiled king's story was far from over, and the forest held many secrets yet to be uncovered. But for now, he would continue to roam, a solitary figure in a world that was both beautiful and unforgiving. The exiled king's journey was one of survival, of resilience in the face of adversity, and as he moved through the forest, his amber eyes gleaming with determination, he knew that he would face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same courage and strength that had brought him this far. The forest was vast, and its secrets endless, and somewhere in the heart of the wilderness, the exiled king would find his place, his purpose. For in the wild, survival was the greatest victory of all. The exiled king. The exiled king moved through the forest with a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter with the strange metallic structure and the mysterious device had left him unsettled, but it had also ignited a spark of curiosity within him. He had always been a creature of instinct, guided by the primal urges of survival, but now something deeper stirred within him, a desire to understand the world beyond the forest, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows. As he ventured further, the forest began to change once more. The trees grew taller and more ancient, their trunks thick with moss and lichen. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The ground beneath his paws was soft, cushioned layers of fallen foliage. It was a place of solitude, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The exiled king paused by a large, gnarled tree, its roots twisting and turning like the veins of the earth. He sniffed at the base of the tree, his keen senses picking up the faint scent of other animals. Deer, boar, and even the musky odor of a bear. But there was something else, something that made his fur bristle with unease. It was a scent he could not quite place, a strange metallic tang that seemed out of place in this wild, untamed world. He followed the scent, his movements slow and deliberate. The forest around him grew darker, the canopy above so thick that even the moonlight struggled to penetrate. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the occasional rustle of underbrush hinted at unseen creatures moving in the shadows. As he moved deeper into the forest, the scent grew stronger, more pronounced. It was a strange, almost alien smell, one that stirred a deep sense of unease within him. But he pressed on, driven by a curiosity that outweighed his fear. Finally, he reached a small clearing, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood another metallic structure, similar to the one he had encountered earlier. But this one was different, larger, more imposing, and covered in strange symbols and blinking lights. The thrumming sound was louder here, a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. The exiled king approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the structure for any sign of danger. There were no humans in sight, no signs of life at all. The structure seemed abandoned, a relic of a world that had no place in the forest. As he circled the structure, a sudden movement caught his eye. A small panel on the side of the structure slid open, revealing a dark, gaping hole. The exiled king froze, his body tensing as he prepared to react. But nothing emerged from the hole. No humans, no animals, no threat. Instead, a faint mechanical whirring sound filled the air, and a small object was ejected from the structure, landing softly on the ground. The exiled king approached cautiously, his eyes locked on the object. It was a small, metallic device, its surface covered in strange symbols and blinking lights. He sniffed at it, his nose wrinkling at the unfamiliar scent. The device emitted a faint, high-pitched beep, and a small screen on its surface lit up, displaying a series of images. The images were strange and incomprehensible, a jumble of shapes and colors that meant nothing to the tiger. But as he watched, the images began to change, forming a pattern that seemed almost familiar. It was a map, a representation of the forest and its surroundings. The exiled king's eyes narrowed as he studied the map, his instincts telling him that it was important. But before he could make sense of it, the device emitted a final, loud beep and fell silent. The screen went dark and the device lay still on the ground. The exiled king stared at it for a moment, a mixture of confusion and frustration swirling within him. He had no way of understanding the device, no way of knowing what it meant. With a low growl, he turned away from the structure and the device, his mind racing. The encounter had left him with more questions than answers, a sense of unease that he could not shake. The forest, once a place of refuge, now seemed filled with mysteries and dangers that he could not comprehend. As he disappeared into the shadows, the structure remained in the clearing, its thrumming growing fainter with each passing moment. The exiled king's story was far from over, and the forest held many secrets yet to be uncovered. But for now, he would continue to roam, a solitary figure in a world that was both beautiful and unforgiving.